There is a particular kind of father who does not make announcements about what he does. He simply does it. He shows up to the school play when no one has asked him to, when the invitation was written on a piece of construction paper by a 7-year-old and taped to the refrigerator 6 weeks before the show, and he treats that construction paper like it has the weight of a formal summons, because to him, it does. He shows up to the science fair and the spelling bee and the first-grade choir concert, where the children sing slightly off-key and slightly off-tempo, and the parents in the audience smile in the specific way of people watching something imperfect that they love completely. He shows up to the parent-teacher conferences at 7 in the morning because those are the only times that work with his schedule, and he sits in a chair designed for a much smaller person, and he listens to what the teachers say about his daughter with the full and undivided attention of someone who understands that showing up is not the same as being present, and that being present is the thing that actually counts. Marcus DeShawn Tillman had been showing up for 14 years. Not metaphorically, not approximately. He had been showing up to the specific, documented, dateable events of his daughter Zara's life for 14 years with the kind of consistency that people who love deeply and plan carefully are capable of sustaining over long distances of time. He had been there for her first day of kindergarten, the moment outside the classroom door, when she had turned back once and looked at him with an expression that held both readiness and uncertainty. And he had held her gaze steadily and nodded in the particular way of a father who is telling his child, "I know this is big. I know you can do it." He had been there for the school carnival in 2nd grade when the borrowed goldfish had died by morning, and the grief of it had required more consoling than the size of the loss seemed to call for. And he had understood, because he had always understood, Zara, that the fish was not the actual subject of the grief, and that what she was working through that morning was something larger and more complicated, a first encounter with the fact that some things end. He had sat with her through that. He had not rushed it or minimized it. He had sat. He was 44 years old and the principal of Northgate High School in the same county where Zara now attended Jefferson Preparatory Academy. He had been a principal for 9 years, an assistant principal before that for 4, and a history teacher before that for 8. He had spent his entire professional life in schools, and he had chosen that life with the specific deliberateness of a man who knew what he was good at, and who understood that the thing you are good at, and the thing that matters to you being the same thing, is not common, and should not be treated as ordinary. He was large, 6 feet 2 broad through the shoulders, with the kind of physical presence that students notice, and that requires a person to be thoughtful about how they use it. He used it gently. He was known at his school for walking the hallways slowly in the mornings, stopping to ask students by name how their evenings had been, remembering the names of younger siblings and grandparents who had been mentioned in passing, carrying in himself a kind of unhurried attention that made the people around him feel that they had time. He had built that quality deliberately. He had needed to build it because his natural pace was fast, and his natural mode was efficiency, and he had learned early in his work with young people that efficiency is not always what a young person needs, standing across from them in the hallway at 7:30 in the morning. He had also been, when he was 17 years old, a mock trial competitor himself. He had competed in this same county program back when it was held in a different building and run with fewer resources and considerably less polish. He had been good at it, though he had not known at the time how good, because when you are 17 and doing something well, you often interpret it as ordinary because it feels natural to you. And you have not yet learned that natural and ordinary are not synonyms. His coach then had been a woman named Patricia Holt, who was at that time a young attorney in the county public defender's office, who volunteered 2 evenings a week to run the mock trial program at his school. She had a quality he had never forgotten, which was the quality of treating a 17-year-old's argument as though it deserved the same rigorous engagement as any argument she might encounter in an actual courtroom. She did not soften her critiques. She did not condescend. She listened to what he said and she responded to what he actually said, not to a simplified version of it, and that responsiveness had been for the boy. Marcus had been at 17, the most important thing anyone in an educational role had ever done for him. It had told him that his thinking was worth taking seriously. It had told him that the argument mattered. It had changed the way he understood what education could be, and that change had followed him through every one of the 21 years he had subsequently spent working in schools. Zara was 17 years old and the captain of the Jefferson Preparatory mock trial team. She had joined mock trial in 8th grade on the suggestion of her English teacher, who had watched her argue politely, methodically, and with complete refusal to stop until her point was established through an in-class debate on a novel, and who had told her afterward that she had a gift for structured argument and that she should find a place to grow it. Zara had found that place, and she had grown it for 3 years with the specific focus of someone who has discovered what they are actually made of and finds that discovery exhilarating. She was good. She was by the assessment of Mr. Solomon Webb, her coach and a history teacher at Jefferson Prep, who had run the mock trial program for 11 years, one of the 2 or 3 most capable student advocates he had coached in his career. She had the ability to hold a complex chain of reasoning while simultaneously reading the room, a combination that was genuinely unusual and that Mr. Webb recognized as the foundation of something that could go very far. He had told Marcus this at the end of Zara's sophomore year. He had told him not to be modest about it. Marcus had not been modest. He had been proud in the quiet way he was proud of everything about his daughter, the way that does not need to be performed because it is too real for performance. The competition today was the county championship of the regional mock trial circuit held at the county courthouse, as it was every year, in the actual courtroom spaces used by actual judges during the week. The chairs and the benches and the lecterns and the jury boxes all in place. The whole architecture of legal consequence surrounding the students as they argued their prepared cases. Zara's team was representing the plaintiff in a civil case involving wrongful detention. The case file had been distributed to all teams 6 weeks earlier, and Zara had spent those 6 weeks preparing her opening statement with the care and precision of someone who understood that the opening statement is not just a recitation of what you intend to prove. It is the first impression. It is the argument before the argument. It is the moment where the jury, even a mock jury made up of other students and faculty observers, decides whether to trust you. She had written 12 drafts. Mr. Webb had reviewed 9 of them. Marcus had listened to all 12 sitting in the living room after dinner, while Zara stood in the center of the room and delivered each version, and he had given his responses not as a father who was proud of whatever she produced, but as a careful listener who believed she was capable of better and who trusted that she would get there. The morning of the competition was a Thursday in April. Marcus had arranged his schedule at Northgate 3 weeks in advance, as he always did for Zara's events, blocking the day as professional development and arranging for his assistant principal to handle morning matters. He had been at every mock trial competition Zara had participated in for 3 years. He had been at every semifinal and every preliminary round. He had been in the courthouse hallways and the parking lots and the fluorescent-lit meeting rooms where teams gathered before their rounds, and he had watched Zara walk into those rooms with the particular composure of someone who is prepared completely and knows it. He wore a pale blue Oxford shirt and dark slacks that morning. He had put on his good suit, originally a charcoal gray one that he wore to important events, and that Zara had told him once looked distinguished, which was a word she had used with the tone of someone offering a serious compliment. But Zara had spilled coffee on the lapel while they were in the kitchen finalizing her binder of materials, and the suit had needed to come off. The coffee had been an accident, the kind that happens when people are moving through a kitchen at the same time, and Zara had been distraught about it for approximately 45 seconds, before Marcus had told her calmly that a suit was a suit, and that it could be cleaned, and that what mattered was whether her binder was organized. And she had looked at him for a moment with the expression she sometimes had of a person who is being reminded of something important by someone who means it, and then she had gone back to her binder. The Oxford shirt was fine. He was not going to argue. He told her the shirt was fine, the slacks were fine, and they got in the car. She rehearsed in the car. This was not unusual. Zara rehearsed in any space where she had a captive audience and a few uninterrupted minutes, and the drive from their house to the county courthouse was 38 minutes on the route Marcus took, which avoided the construction on the bypass and added 2 minutes, but eliminated the left turn at the light on Grandview that had taken them 11 minutes of waiting the last time they had tried it. She had her binder open on her lap, even though she had memorized the opening statement. The binder was a safety net, not a script. She had told him this, and he had understood exactly what she meant. She began about 10 minutes into the drive after they had cleared the neighborhood and gotten onto the main road, and after the radio had been turned down without either of them asking, because they both understood that the drive had shifted into preparation mode. Her voice when she delivered the opening statement was different from her everyday voice. It was not louder or more formal. It was more precise. She placed words with a care that was almost architectural, as though she were building something that needed to hold weight. She said, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you will see in this courtroom today is not complicated." A man was walking. He was walking on a public street, in a public place in the middle of the day, minding his own business, carrying nothing suspicious, doing nothing wrong. And he was stopped. He was detained. He was held in place by someone with authority who had made a decision about who he was before he had done a single thing to earn that decision. He was told to explain himself, and when he tried to explain himself, his explanation was not believed, not because it was implausible, not because the facts did not support it, but because the person with authority had already decided before a single fact was examined what the truth was. And the question before you today is simple. When authority makes that kind of decision, when it decides first and examines second, and when that decision costs an innocent person their dignity and their time and their freedom of movement, who is responsible for that cost? Marcus listened to those words while he drove. He listened to his daughter construct an argument about a fictional plaintiff who had been wrongfully stopped and held, and he felt in the construction of that argument the specific quality of something true. He did not say this to her because they were in the middle of her rehearsal, and interrupting a rehearsal to tell someone that their argument is true is a kind of distraction, and he did not want to distract her. But the words sat with him as he drove, and he turned them over in the way he turned things over when they felt important, carefully and without rushing. She finished the full opening statement, which ran 8 minutes and 43 seconds by his dashboard clock. And he waited a beat after she was done, and then he said the sentence about who is responsible for the cost. Say that again a little slower at the end. Let the last word land. She said it again. She let the last word land. He nodded. She nodded back. They arrived at the county courthouse at 8:37 in the morning. The competition did not begin until 9 o'clock, and the team was expected to be signed in by 8:50. Which gave them 13 minutes from the moment they pulled into the parking lot. The courthouse was a building that Marcus had always found imposing in the particular way of buildings that mean something. It was not ornate. It was a 4-story structure of pale limestone with broad steps leading up to the main entrance. Double doors of dark wood and brass, and above the doors the carved words that are carved above the doors of most American courthouses: Justice is the firm and continuous desire to render to everyone his due. He had looked at those words many times over the years, on occasions when Zara had competed here. He thought of them the way he thought of any public promise, as a measure of how closely the practice matched the declaration. He parked in the visitor's lot, and they both got out, and Zara took her binder and her team bag, and Marcus took the second bag, which held the team's additional evidence binders and the display materials they had prepared for the visual aids portion of their presentation, and they walked together across the lot and up the broad steps and through the main doors. The security checkpoint just inside the entrance was staffed by 2 officers. One of them, a woman of about 50, with gray at her temples, and a professional ease, nodded at Zara and Marcus as they put their items through the scanner and waved them through. The other, a younger officer who was talking into a radio, did not look up. The mock trial registration table was in the corridor outside courtroom 3 on the second floor. Mr. Solomon Webb was already there, tall and lean in his good jacket, the one he wore to competitions and to the end-of-year recognition event, with a lanyard around his neck that held his faculty badge and the competition credential he had picked up from registration. He saw them coming down the corridor and raised a hand in greeting, and his expression when he saw Marcus carrying the bag was the expression of a man who has been coaching a program for 11 years and who knows that parent involvement of this caliber is not ordinary and does not take it for granted. He shook Marcus's hand. He told Zara she looked ready. She said she was. He asked if the traffic had been manageable. Marcus said they had taken the alternate route. The other 3 members of the team arrived in the next 4 minutes, 2 of them together, and 1 alone, all of them, with the particular look of students who have prepared and are aware of being prepared, and are also aware of the weight of the moment. Zara greeted each of them with the specific ease of a captain who knows what her team needs, which in this case was steadiness, and she provided it. Marcus watched this and felt the thing he always felt watching Zara in her domain, which was a kind of pride that had texture to it, that was made of specific accumulated observations, rather than the general warmth of parental feeling. He was proud of the specific way she stood. He was proud of the specific way she spoke to each of her teammates. He was proud in a way that required no translation. The sign-in sheet for parent witnesses was on the registration table. Marcus signed it. His signature was the 9th on the page. He noted the time on the sheet, 8:44. The competition started at 9. 16 minutes. He told Zara he was going to move the car because he had parked in the 30-minute zone and did not want a ticket. She was deep in a final review with Mr. Webb and 2 of her teammates, and she looked up briefly and said okay, and looked back at her notes. He picked up his jacket from the chair where he had set it and walked back down the corridor and down the stairs and out through the front doors of the courthouse. It was a mild morning. The sky was the color that spring mornings are sometimes, a pale blue with the quality of light that has not yet decided whether it will be warm or cool. He came down the broad courthouse steps and crossed the plaza toward the visitor's lot. He had the car key in his hand. He was moving at his normal pace, which was deliberate, but not slow. The pace of a man who moves through public space with awareness, but without anxiety. He was approximately 30 feet from his car when he heard a voice behind him. The voice said, "Hey you, hold on a second." He turned. The voice belonged to a uniformed officer who was walking toward him from the direction of the courthouse main entrance. The officer was white, broad-chested, with a close-cut beard and a slight forward lean to his walk that Marcus associated with a particular kind of physical confidence, the kind that precedes rather than follows engagement. He was wearing a badge. He was not the officer from the security checkpoint inside. He was one of the officers stationed outside on the courthouse grounds. Marcus stopped. He turned to face the officer completely. He held his jacket in his left hand and his car key in his right. He kept his expression even. He had learned over a lifetime and through the specific education that black men in America receive through the curriculum of ordinary days, how to hold his expression when an officer approached him unexpectedly in a public place. He held it. He waited. The officer arrived at a distance of about 5 feet and stopped. He was Officer Ray Colfax, though Marcus did not know that name yet. He would know it later. He would know it thoroughly. But in this moment, he was simply a uniformed officer who had called out to him from across the courthouse plaza, and who was now standing 5 feet away with an expression that contained no greeting. Colfax said, "What are you doing out here?" Marcus said he had just come out of the courthouse. He said he was moving his car from the 30-minute zone. Colfax said you were inside. Marcus said yes. He said he had come to the courthouse with his daughter for a school competition. He said the mock trial regional championship was being held here today. Colfax looked at him. The look lasted a beat longer than the look of someone processing new information. It had a quality that Marcus had encountered before, the look of someone who has already formed a conclusion and is deciding whether to adjust it. Colfax said, "Can I see some ID?" Marcus said, "Certainly." He shifted the jacket to his right hand, transferred the key to his jacket hand, and reached into his back pocket for his wallet. He produced his driver's license and held it out. Colfax took it. He looked at it for a moment. He said, "What's the competition?" Marcus said it was the county mock trial championship. He said his daughter was captain of the team from Jefferson Preparatory Academy. He said the competition started at 9 o'clock and that they had arrived a few minutes before 9, and he had signed the parent witness form and then come out to move the car because he was in the 30-minute zone. Colfax said, "And where's your daughter now?" Marcus said she was inside. He said she was on the second floor outside courtroom 3 with her team and their coach. Colfax looked at the license again. He looked at Marcus. He said, "So you're here for a school event?" Marcus said that was correct. He said it the way a man says something for the second time, when the first time should have been sufficient, which is to say, with perfect patience and with a quality underneath the patience that was not patience at all. Colfax handed the license back. Then he said, "Stay here a minute." Marcus said, "I'm sorry." Colfax said he wanted to verify the event. He said it would only take a moment. Marcus said that was fine. He said he was happy to wait. He did not say what he was actually thinking, which was that he had produced identification, had explained his purpose, clearly had given every piece of information that was relevant, and that what was happening here was not a verification. He recognized what it was. He had recognized it from the first words spoken to him across the courthouse plaza. He waited. Colfax moved a few feet away and spoke into his radio. Marcus did not catch all of the words. He caught outside the main entrance and checking on a subject and back in a minute. He stood in the mild April morning with his jacket in one hand and his car key in the other and his driver's license back in his wallet. And he thought about Zara inside the courthouse 30 seconds into a final review with Mr. Webb. 14 minutes from the start of a competition she had prepared for over 6 weeks. A competition he had been present for in every preparatory round for 3 years. A competition that required his signature on a parent witness form, which he had already placed on the list, and he thought 22 minutes. He had stepped outside approximately 9 minutes ago. The competition started in 13 minutes. He needed to be back inside in under 10. He said, "Officer, I do need to get back inside fairly soon. The competition begins at 9 and the team needs their parent witness signed in before it starts. I've already signed the sheet, but I'd like to be present when the round begins." Colfax said he would be a few minutes. Marcus said, "I understand. But I want to make sure you understand the timeline here. This is a timed event, and my daughter's team could be penalized if their required parent witness is not present at the start." Colfax said he heard him. There was something in the way he said it that made clear he had heard, but that hearing was not the same as caring. Marcus noted this. He filed it. He remained where he was. A second officer arrived from the side entrance of the courthouse. She was younger than Colfax, with close-cropped hair and a professional bearing that was different from Colfax's, more contained, less performative. She looked at Marcus and then at Colfax. Colfax said something to her quietly that Marcus did not fully hear, though he caught the words called in and running and waiting. The second officer looked at Marcus again. Her look was different from Colfax. It was the look of a person who is reading a situation and not yet sure what she is reading. Marcus said, addressing both of them, "I am Marcus DeShawn Tillman. I am the principal of Northgate High School. I am here today because my daughter Zara Tillman is the captain of the Jefferson Preparatory Academy mock trial team, and she is competing in the county championship inside this building. I arrived at 8:37 this morning. I helped carry my daughter's team materials inside. I signed the parent witness form at 8:44. I came outside to move my car from the 30-minute parking zone. My car is in the visitor's lot. If you need to verify any of this, Mr. Solomon Webb, who is the coach of the Jefferson Preparatory mock trial team, is inside on the second floor outside courtroom 3, and he can confirm everything I have told you." He said all of this evenly. He said it the way he delivered information that needed to be understood, which was with clarity and without apology, and with the specific kind of steadiness that comes from saying something that is completely true. "Colfax said, I'm going to need you to stay here while we confirm your story." Marcus said, "My story?" "Colfax said the information you've provided." Marcus looked at him steadily. He said, "I will stay here. But I want to state clearly that I have provided accurate identification, explained my purpose fully, and that I am now being detained outside the courthouse on no basis I can identify beyond having been seen standing in the parking lot. I want that to be clear." "Colfax said you're not being detained. I'm just asking you to wait." Marcus said, "I cannot walk away. Therefore, I am detained. Those are the two options, officer. Either I can leave or I cannot. If I cannot leave, I am detained." Colfax said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Just stay where you are." Marcus stayed. He looked at his watch. 8:49. The competition started in 11 minutes. His daughter was inside. He thought about the morning he had become a principal. He thought about it not because it was relevant to this situation, but because standing in place under conditions that cannot be addressed by doing anything forces the mind into motion in the only direction available, which is backward. He had been appointed principal of Northgate in June of the year Zara finished 3rd grade. He had received the news on a Wednesday, and Zara had been at day camp, and he had picked her up that afternoon and told her in the car that he had gotten a new job, and she had said, "What is your new job?" And he had said, "I am going to be the person in charge of a high school." And she had considered this with the seriousness she brought to information that needed to be processed. And then she had said, "Does that mean you will be in charge of people older than me?" And he had said yes. And she had said, "Then you have to be really patient, because older people think they already know things, and sometimes they do not, and if you rush them, they get defensive." He had looked at her in the rearview mirror. She had been 8 years old. He had said, "That is exactly right." She had gone back to looking out the window. That girl was inside a courtroom right now. She had prepared for this day with more seriousness and more thoroughness than he had ever watched another person prepare for anything. She had been at that plaintiff's table for 18 minutes. She did not know why he was not there yet. He knew with the specific certainty of a father who has been present for 14 years that she trusted he would come. He knew she was holding that trust in one hand and the weight of what it would mean if he did not come in the other, and balancing them and staying ready because she was Zara, and staying ready was what Zara did. Inside, Zara Tillman was standing at the plaintiff's table in courtroom 3 with 2 of her teammates reviewing the sequence of witnesses with Mr. Webb. The courtroom was a real one used for actual proceedings with dark wood paneling and a high ceiling, and the bench elevated at the front of the room where today the presiding judge for the competition would sit. The jury box was to the left. The gallery was filling slowly with observers from the other team's faculty members, a few parents who had arrived early and found seats. Zara knew the order of everything. She had known it for 2 weeks, but she reviewed it anyway because reviewing it was part of the preparation, not because she feared forgetting, but because repetition under pressure was a form of insurance, and she was a person who took insurance seriously. She glanced at the gallery. She saw parents in the seats. She saw Mr. Webb coming back from the doorway. She did not see her father. She thought he went to move the car. He will be back. He is always back. She turned back to her notes. Outside, Marcus stood in the April morning, and the minutes moved. He counted them not because he wanted to, but because a man who has been asked to stand in place while a clock is running cannot stop counting. He had been outside for 14 minutes. He had told Colfax about the timeline 3 times. Colfax had his radio in his hand and was on it again, speaking in the low tone of someone conducting official business. And with each exchange on the radio, the quality of the situation thickened, because official business made this more rather than less. It added weight and procedure to what was already an immovable circumstance. The second officer, whose name tag Marcus could see read Officer T. Warren, had stepped to the side and was on her phone. Her expression was the expression of a person who is making a call she is uncertain about, either in terms of its appropriateness or in terms of what she might learn. A third person came out of the courthouse. Not an officer. A man in civilian clothes, tall, lean, with a lanyard around his neck and a phone in his hand. He came through the front doors and down the broad steps, and he stopped when he saw what he was looking at. And what he was looking at was Marcus DeShawn Tillman, standing in the courthouse plaza with two uniformed officers and the expression of a man who is being extraordinarily patient under circumstances that do not deserve patience. "Mr. Solomon Webb," said Marcus, "what is happening?" Marcus said, "I came outside to move the car and I was stopped. Can you verify to these officers who I am and why I'm here?" Solomon Webb turned to Colfax. He said, "I am Solomon Webb. I am the faculty coach for the Jefferson Preparatory Academy mock trial team. This is Marcus Tillman. He is Zara Tillman's father. He arrived with us this morning at 8:37. He carried our team materials inside. He signed the parent witness form. He is supposed to be inside that building right now because the competition begins in..." Webb looked at his phone. His voice changed slightly. He said 8 minutes. Colfax said, "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back." Webb said, "I'm going to need you to let this man inside. We have a competition that starts in 8 minutes, and his daughter's team cannot begin without a parent witness, and he has already signed in, and there is no reason he should be standing out here." Colfax said, "I understand the concern. I'm handling a matter." Webb said, "What matter?" Colfax said, "That's not information I need to share with you right now." Webb said nothing, but he raised his phone. The phone went up horizontal at the level of his chest, the camera facing forward, and he began to record. He did not announce that he was recording. He simply recorded with the calmness of a man who has 11 years of experience handling situations that require documentation, and who understands that documentation is not an escalation, it is a record. Colfax looked at the phone. His expression shifted in the specific way of an officer who has been recorded before and knows what it means and does not like it. He did not tell Webb to stop recording. He knew he could not. He looked back at Marcus. He said, "I'm going to radio to confirm the event is taking place inside." Marcus said, "I gave you that information 8 minutes ago." Colfax said nothing. He raised his radio. He said into it, "Colfax main entrance exterior. I have a subject detained outside the front of the building. Running a check. Possible trespassing concern resolved, but I'm still running the identity verification." Marcus heard the word detained, and he looked at Colfax for a long moment without saying anything. Webb heard it too. He shifted his angle slightly to make sure the camera had the clearest view. Inside the courthouse, in the clerk's office on the first floor, a courthouse employee named Angela Park had just taken a call from Officer Warren on the interior line. Warren had asked quietly whether there was a mock trial competition today and whether a Jefferson Preparatory Academy team was registered. Angela had said yes to both. She had also said before hanging up that the competition started in a few minutes and that the presiding judge for the event was waiting in chambers and might want to know if there was an issue with any of the participants. Warren had said, "Who is the judge?" Angela Park had said, "Judge Holt. Judge Patricia Holt. She's been running the mock trial program here for 15 years. Warren had paused. Then she had said, "Would you let the judge's clerk know there might be an issue just as an information item?" Angela had said she would. In the gallery of courtroom 3, the seats were almost full. The other team, the defense team from Riverside Preparatory, was arranged at their table. The competition coordinator was at the front of the room checking her clipboard. Zara was at the plaintiff's table. She had her binder open. She had her pen in her hand. She had the opening statement in her head, all 8 minutes and 43 seconds of it, every word in order, every pause calibrated. She had prepared for this moment for 6 weeks and for 3 years before that, and for the entire span of her adolescence before that, all of the reading and the thinking and the arguing around the dinner table and the listening to her father tell her that the point of a good argument was not to win but to illuminate. She was ready. She looked at the gallery again. Her father's seat was in the second row on the left side, the seat where he always sat at her events, close enough to see her clearly, but not so close as to be in her direct line of sight when she was at the lectern. The seat was empty. It was 8:56. Mr. Webb was not back yet. She felt the first movement of something in her chest that was not nervousness about the argument. She had managed her nervousness about the argument weeks ago. This was something else. She looked at the competition coordinator who was checking her clipboard and not looking at the door. She looked at her teammate Elena, who was seated to her left and who met her gaze with a look that asked, "Where's your dad?" Zara said quietly he went to move the car. "He'll be here." She looked back at the door, 8:57. Outside, the situation had reached what Marcus understood to be its most complete form. There were now 3 uniformed officers on the courthouse plaza. Colfax, Warren, and a third officer who had arrived from the side of the building 2 minutes ago and who had not introduced himself and who had stationed himself in a position that was not subtle about its purpose, which was to be between Marcus and the courthouse entrance. The entrance was 20 feet away. The broad steps were 20 feet away. His daughter was inside a building 20 feet from where he was standing, and he could not reach her because 3 uniformed officers were in the space between them, and one of them had used the word "detained" on his radio, and none of them had given him a reason that corresponded to any reality Marcus could observe. He was not shouting. He had not raised his voice. He had not made any sudden movements. He had not done any of the things that a person does who is a problem. He had stood in the April morning with his jacket in one hand and his car key in the other, and he had answered every question, produced identification, explained his purpose, provided a witness, named the judge, named the coach, named the competition, named his daughter. And he was still standing on the wrong side of 20 feet of Courthouse Plaza while a clock moved. This was the thing about those 19 minutes that would not fit inside any formal complaint, any recorded footage, any administrative report, no matter how carefully written. The formal record could capture what Colfax said and what Marcus said in response. It could capture the timestamp on Webb's recording. It could capture the distance from Marcus's position to the courthouse entrance and the time remaining before the competition started. What it could not capture was the 19 minutes of internal experience that a man who has spent his entire adult life building dignity by hand goes through when he is held in place by someone who looked at him and decided before a fact was examined, before a word was spoken, before any evidence of any kind was considered, that he was the kind of person who needed to be stopped. What it could not capture was the specific quality of the effort it takes to hold your expression level and your voice even and your body still, when every atom of what you know about yourself, your name, your title, your 14 years of showing up your daughter inside who is waiting your driver's license, your signature on the form at 8:44 in the morning is invisible to the person who has the authority to decide whether you can walk through a door. That effort has a weight. It has a cost. And the cost does not appear on any formal report. But it is real, and it is the cost that matters most, and it is the cost that Officer Ray Colfax had imposed on Marcus DeShawn Tillman on a mild April morning outside the county courthouse for no reason that withstood examination. Webb was still filming. His phone was up. His face was controlled, but his eyes were the eyes of a man who is watching something that he intends to be held accountable every second of it by anyone who ever sees this footage. Marcus said to no one in particular, and to everyone in particular, "I need someone to tell me the specific reason I cannot walk into that courthouse." Colfax said, "I told you I'm running a check." Marcus said, "What check?" Colfax said, "Identity verification." Marcus said, "You have my driver's license. You have my name. You have my school affiliation. You have a witness standing here who has confirmed everything I told you. You have the courthouse clerk who confirmed the event is taking place. What specifically is the identity verification attempting to verify? Colfax said nothing. Warren said quietly, to no one in particular, the check came back clean. Colfax looked at her. He looked at Marcus. He said, I still have a... He stopped, because the courthouse doors had opened, and the person who came through them was not a clerk and not an assistant and not another officer. She was a woman of 61 years wearing a black robe with white hair and dark eyes, and the bearing of someone who has been presiding over things for 23 years and who has not lost a single day of it. She came through the doors, and she came down the steps with the specific authority of a person who does not need to hurry to make clear that something is about to be addressed. She was the Honorable Patricia Holt. She had been a family court judge in this county for 23 years. She had presided over the county mock trial competition for 15 of those years. She had that morning been informed by her clerk that there was a situation on the courthouse exterior involving a participant's parent. She had come to see what that situation was. She stopped at the top of the steps. She looked at the scene below her. She looked at 3 uniformed officers. She looked at Solomon Webb with his phone raised. She looked at the man standing in the center of it, tall, in a pale blue Oxford shirt and dark slacks, with a jacket in one hand and a car key in the other, with an expression of extraordinary composure on his face and in his eyes the look of a man who has been holding himself together for reasons that cost him something. She said his name. She said it the way you say a name when you have not said it in many years, and the recognition of it arriving in you is immediate and complete. She said Marcus. The plaza was quiet. The officers looked at her. Webb looked at her. Marcus turned toward the steps. She said Marcus DeShawn Tillman. She came down 2 more steps. Her voice was not loud, but it was the voice of a person accustomed to being heard in rooms where things matter. She said, I know this man. She looked at Colfax when she said it. She said, I know exactly who he is. She said this man was 17 years old when I first met him. He was standing at a lectern in a courtroom not unlike the one upstairs representing the plaintiff in a wrongful termination case. And he delivered an opening statement that I have remembered for 27 years because it was the best reasoned argument I had heard from a high school student in the 20 years before or since. She paused. She said I was his mentor in this competition when he was a student, and today his daughter is competing in this courtroom, which is where he should be right now. Colfax said, Your Honor, I was conducting an identity. She said, an identity verification. Yes, I understand what you were conducting. She came the rest of the way down the steps. She was 5'4", and she was the largest presence on the courthouse plaza. She said, Mr. Tillman, please come inside. Your daughter is waiting for you. Marcus said, Thank you, Your Honor. He walked to the steps. No one blocked him. He climbed the steps and came to where she was standing, and she looked at him with the look of a person who is glad to see someone, and also deeply sorry for the reason they are seeing them in this way. And he looked at her with the look of a man who has been holding himself together, and who is now in the presence of someone who knew him when he was 17, and who is not confused about who he is for even a single second. And then he went inside. Webb lowered his phone. He looked at Colfax. Then he followed Marcus inside. She turned to the officers. She turned specifically to Colfax. She had 23 years of family court behind her, and the specific quality of attention that 23 years of listening to people's worst and most important moments produces, which is the ability to say difficult things with complete clarity and without fury, because fury is not the instrument. Clarity is the instrument. She said, I want to speak to you about what I observed this morning. She said it to Colfax, directly holding his gaze. She said, I saw a man standing on this plaza who had identified himself, produced documentation, provided a witness, and given you every piece of information you needed to understand who he was and why he was here. I saw that man kept from entering a public building he had every right to enter while a clock ran while his daughter sat inside waiting for him. She paused. She said, I do not know what specific concern prompted you to stop him, but I know what I did not see. I did not see a single piece of behavior that would justify what I witnessed. She said, I also know the argument his daughter is making inside that courtroom today, because I read all the case files for this competition as I do every year. His daughter is arguing that wrongful detention, the act of stopping and holding a person without justifiable cause based on an assumption formed before any evidence was examined, is not a misunderstanding. It is not a miscommunication. It is not an unfortunate accident. It is a choice made by a person with authority, and that person is responsible for the cost of that choice. She let that land. She said that argument was written by a 17-year-old girl who came here today to make it in a mock courtroom. She did not expect to watch it happen to her father on the courthouse steps. She said, I will be filing a report with your division commander this afternoon. I recommend you use the time between now and then to reflect carefully on what decisions were made here and why. She turned and went back up the steps and through the doors and inside. Colfax stood on the plaza. Warren stood beside him. The third officer had already moved back toward the side of the building. Webb's phone was still in his hand. Inside the courthouse, Marcus came up the stairs to the second floor at a pace that was fast without being running. He came down the corridor and turned the corner and came to the doors of courtroom 3, and he pushed them open and he walked in. Zara saw him. She had been looking at the door. She had been looking at it for 11 minutes with the specific expression of a person who believes the thing they are waiting for will come, and who is also, underneath that belief, afraid that it will not. She saw him come through the door in his pale blue Oxford shirt and his dark slacks with his jacket over one arm, and she looked at him for one long moment, and then she turned back to the front of the room because she was a professional, and she had a competition to run, and her father was here. And that was the thing that had needed to happen, and it had happened. Marcus took his seat in the second row on the left side, the seat that was his seat. He folded his jacket across his lap. He looked at the front of the room where his daughter sat at the plaintiff's table with her binder open and her pen in her hand, and her shoulders straight and her posture exactly the posture he had watched her build over 3 years of competing in courtrooms. The posture that said, I am here. I have prepared. I am ready. The competition coordinator stood. She said good morning and welcomed everyone and introduced the presiding judge. The Honorable Patricia Holt entered from the side door in her robe and took the bench. She looked at the room. She looked at the plaintiff's table. She looked at the gallery, and for a moment her eyes found Marcus in the second row on the left. And she held that look for exactly 1 second, and then she looked at the room as a whole, and she said, good morning. Please be seated. Zara stood. She walked to the lectern. She placed her binder on the surface, but she did not open it. She looked at the jury box where the students who would evaluate her argument were seated. She straightened. She began. She said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you will see in this courtroom today is not complicated. A man was walking. He was walking on a public street in a public place in the middle of the day, minding his own business, carrying nothing suspicious, doing nothing wrong. And he was stopped. She said it exactly in the way she had said it in the car. She said it with the same precision, the same architecture, the same placement of each word in the space where it belonged. But something in it was different now from all the times she had said it before. Different from the 12 drafts and the 9 reviews and the rehearsal in the passenger seat that morning. It was different because she had seen what she was describing. She had not been told about it or read about it or reasoned her way to an understanding of it. She had sat at a plaintiff's table for 11 minutes and looked at a door and felt in her own chest what it costs when the person who is supposed to walk through is being held on the wrong side of it by someone who made a decision before examining a single fact. She continued, he was detained. He was held in place by someone with authority who had made a decision about who he was before he had done a single thing to earn that decision. He was told to explain himself, and when he tried to explain himself, his explanation was not believed, not because it was implausible, not because the facts did not support it, but because the person with authority had already decided before a single fact was examined what the truth was. And the question before you today is simple. When authority makes that kind of decision, when it decides first and examines second, and when that decision costs an innocent person their dignity and their time and their freedom of movement, who is responsible for that cost? She paused. She let the last word land. Her father had told her to let the last word land. The last word was cost. She let it land. In the second row on the left side, Marcus heard his daughter's words and he felt them, the way you feel a thing that has passed through your own body. He had lived those words this morning. He had stood on the courthouse plaza and felt the specific cost of someone else's decision made before a fact was examined. And now he was sitting in a courtroom while his daughter argued the case of a fictional plaintiff, and every word she said was a word about something real. He did not cry. He was not that kind of man in public spaces. But his jaw was set and his hands were still on his folded jacket, and he was watching his daughter with the full attention that a man brings to a thing when he understands that it is important in more than one way at once. Zara argued for 8 minutes and 43 seconds. When she finished, the jury evaluators wrote their notes. The competition coordinator moved through the procedural stages. The defense team made their arguments. The witnesses were examined and cross-examined, and Zara handled the cross-examination of the opposing witness with the specific composure that Mr. Webb had told Marcus was the hardest skill to develop, and the one Zara had most thoroughly mastered. She was not rattled. She was not thrown. She listened, and she responded, and every response was built on the foundation of what the other side had actually said, rather than what she had expected them to say, which is the difference between a real advocate and a student who has memorized a script. The competition ran 2 hours and 15 minutes. At the end, the evaluators conferred. The coordinator collected the scores. She announced them. Jefferson Preparatory Academy plaintiffs' team won by 4 points. Zara's teammates said things that teammates say when they win, the specific sounds and gestures of people who have worked for something and reached it. Zara stood at the plaintiff's table and she let herself feel the winning for a few seconds, and then she looked at the gallery and found her father in the second row on the left, and she looked at him with the look of a 17-year-old girl who knows exactly who showed up for her and what it cost them. Marcus stood. He nodded. He did not whoop or raise his hands. He nodded the way he nodded in the car that morning after she had let the last word land. The nod that means yes. That was the right thing. You did that. After the courtroom cleared and the teams were gathering their materials, and the evaluators were filing out, Judge Patricia Holt descended from the bench. She crossed the courtroom to where Marcus was standing, and she stood in front of him. And she was not in the posture of a judge then, but in the posture of a woman who had known a young man 27 years ago, and who was glad to see what he had become, even under these circumstances. She said, "She is extraordinary, Marcus." He said, "Yes, she is." She said, "I heard some of what happened outside from my clerk and from Officer Warren, who came to see me before the competition began. I want you to know that the formal report I said I would file this afternoon will be filed. There will be an official account of what occurred on that plaza." He said he was grateful. She said, "Solomon Webb's recording has been sent to the division commander's office. I received confirmation of that before the competition started. The recording is time-stamped and complete." He nodded. She said, "What happened to you this morning was not an accident, and it will not be treated as one." She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she said, "You were the best student advocate I ever mentored. I have always thought you would do something important with that. Looking at your daughter, I think you already did." She left. Marcus stood in the empty courtroom with his jacket over his arm and his car key in his pocket, and he stood there for a moment in the specific quiet of a place where something important has just been settled. He went to find Zara in the corridor. The formal complaint filed by Judge Holt that afternoon named Officer Ray Colfax specifically and detailed the sequence of events on the courthouse plaza. The complaint noted that Colfax had detained an identified individual for a period of 19 minutes without articulable cause, that the individual had produced identification, provided witness testimony, and been confirmed by courthouse staff, and that Colfax had continued the detention after all of those verifications had been completed. The complaint also noted that this was not Officer Colfax's first encounter with such a complaint. His record included 2 prior complaints of unlawful stop filed in the previous 3 years, both cases involving black men stopped in public spaces without apparent cause, and both resulting in administrative review but not in formal action. Mr. Webb's recording was submitted with the complaint. The recording was 8 minutes and 44 seconds. It showed everything from the moment Webb came out of the courthouse to the moment Marcus went inside with Judge Holt. The division commander reviewed it the same afternoon. He requested Officer Colfax's full file. The review process that followed was the formal kind, the kind with a date and a file number and a supervisor and a set of conclusions that go on paper and stay there. Officer Colfax was placed on administrative review pending the outcome of the complaint investigation. The investigation was expected to take 30 days. The outcome of the investigation and any resulting action would be determined by the review board. Marcus filed his own formal complaint that evening from his home with Zara sitting at the kitchen table doing her homework and with the trophy from the competition. A clear acrylic block with the county seal and the words "Regional Champion" and the date sitting at the edge of the table where it caught the kitchen light. He wrote the complaint the way he wrote everything important, which was carefully and without exaggeration. He described what had happened in the order in which it had happened. He named the time at each stage. He described what he had said and what had been said in return. He described the moment Colfax used the word "detained" on the radio. He described waiting. He described the 19 minutes. He read it once. When he was done, he sent it. Zara was looking at him from across the table. She had been watching him write without saying anything in the specific way she had of paying attention to her father without announcing that she was paying attention. She said, "Did you hear my opening?" He said every word. She said, "Did it sound different to you from all the other times?" He was quiet for a moment. He looked at her. He said it sounded like something that was true. She looked at him for a long moment with the look of a 17-year-old girl who is understanding something that she suspected was true and is now having it confirmed. She said, "That is because it was." He said, "Yes, it was." They sat in the kitchen with the trophy catching the light, and the complaint sent, and the evening moving toward its quiet end. And Marcus thought about Zara's words at the lectern, and about Patricia Holt on the courthouse steps, and about 27 years, and about the 14 years he had been showing up, and about what it means when showing up is complicated by people who have the authority to complicate it, and who use that authority without examining what they are doing or why. He had been showing up for 14 years. He intended to keep showing up. He would not stop showing up because someone with a badge and a prior record of bad decisions had stood in his way for 19 minutes on a courthouse plaza on a mild April morning. He would not stop because stopping was not a thing he did. He had signed a parent witness form at 8:44 in the morning, and his name was on that form, and the form was in the records of the county courthouse, and it would stay there the way all records stay as a fact that does not need anyone's permission to be true. Zara won the county championship. She argued the case of a wrongfully detained man with the knowledge of someone who had watched it happen. She let the last word land. Her father was in the second row on the left side, the seat that was his seat, the seat he had earned through 14 years of showing up to every single thing his daughter did. He was there. He was always there. He was there even when someone tried to make the being there cost more than it should. If this story meant something to you, subscribe our channel. We tell stories about fathers who show up to every single thing their children do and what happens when someone tries to make that showing up cost more than it should.